Hi, I'm Dan, this is at Midlife Crisis Motorcyclist, and I'm here in Spain for my first ever sports bike launch. Yes, I'm here to ride this new Triumph Daytona 660, which kind of picks up where bikes like the Daytona 600, 650 and 675 left off. It's a proper Triumph sports bike, in other words. Only it kind of isn't, is it? Now, I may be fairly new to all this, but I understand enough that the sports bike world has rather changed in the 20 years or so since the Daytona 600 came out. And although there are still a few kind of die-hard, hardcore supersports race reps out there, bikes like this Daytona 660 represent a bit of a new breed. Are they sort of sports bikes? Pseudo-sports? Well, I don't know what we're calling them, but although they look like sports bikes, they're actually something maybe a little bit more, I don't know, friendly, approachable, less scary? I don't know. I've not ridden one yet, so I guess we're going to find out. Now, in terms of the template for these kind of bikes, that's kind of already been set, hasn't it? So you're looking at a price of £9,000 or less, peak power of 100 horsepower or less, with the option to run in A2 compliant form for younger riders, and a general sense of the kind of friendliness and approachability and affordability of the kind of sporty nakeds that a lot of the target audience will be coming from, just with that kind of fully fared sports bike look. And in terms of nailing the brief, the Daytona 660 seems to have done that in some style. Loosely based on the rather good Trident 660, it uses a version of the same 660cc triple with power increased to a pretty healthy sounding 95 horsepower, and the price starting at £8,595, which sounds pretty good, doesn't it? In terms of rivals, it's up against bikes like the Honda CBR 650R, which Triumph seems to have benchmarked pretty thoroughly against this new Daytona 660 in terms of price, performance, size, weight and all that kind of thing. The Honda does have a four-cylinder engine, which kind of marks it out as something a bit different in the sector, given that most of the rest of the bikes run parallel twins. So you'd be looking at things like the Yamaha R7, the Suzuki GSX 8R, Kawasaki Ninja 650, things like that. Whatever the kind of philosophical or technical differences between them, they seem to have settled on a similar formula, don't they, of a steel frame, relatively under-stressed engine, reasonably affordable components, and just a sort of a sense of usability, accessibility and affordability, I keep coming back to those words, don't I, that are kind of different from the much more hardcore and expensive supersports bikes that are still in the market, so things like the Honda CBR 600RR or the Kawasaki Ninja ZX 6R. In terms of the way it looks, the Daytona 660 certainly kind of presents as a sports bike, doesn't it? But when you start looking a little closer, you notice a few little other things about it, like the fact that this, what looks like an aluminium frame here, is actually a plastic cladding over a more basic steel frame. The clip-ons are not actual clip-ons, it's kind of a flat bar setup, and the parts on it are decent but not fancy. These Showa 41mm upside down big piston forks, they're pretty much identical to the ones you'll find on most of the bikes in this sector. They're non-adjustable. At the back you've got preload adjustment only, nothing more than that, but that's kind of fine for the price, isn't it? And in terms of the way it looks, this Daytona 660 is going to turn the right heads in the right places. And for a rookie rider like myself, this Daytona 660 presents perhaps a less intimidating way to get on a sporty kind of bike. One you can just get on and ride without feeling like you have to squeeze your dad bod into some sort of leather romper suit with knee sliders and make out like you're some hotshot supersports rider who lives from one track day to the next. A sports bike without, shall we say, the burden of expectation, or indeed the kind of expense or practical compromises involved in going for one of those proper race rep supersports bikes. All sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? Best get suited and booted and get out there. So, another day, another Triumph. I do realise there have been quite a lot of its bikes on the channel recently, but that's purely because it's been launching a lot. And rest assured there will be some bikes from other brands coming in due course. Indeed, I've got the Suzuki GSX 8R coming in a couple of weeks' time, so that'll be a really good comparison with this bike, given it's one of the kind of key competitors. so keep an eye open for that. But in terms of this first sports bike, sporty bike, whatever we're calling it, first sporty bike experience, how does it feel? Well, I will admit, the idea of riding a bike like this is, yeah, it's pretty scary, or perhaps at least intimidating, given I've not really ridden anything like this before in my riding career to date. So, and I got to say, the first thing that I noticed just getting on it is how stretched out and kind of low I feel, how low the front end is. It's completely different from anything I've ever even sat on before, so straight away it feels very, very different and a little bit kind of, yeah, a bit more intense. So that's taking some dialing in. But what it does do, and I don't know why I'm surprised about this, is that it kind of puts you both in the frame of mind and the body position that you need to be hitting the corners with a bit more speed. So having that weight on your wrists means that you're naturally loading up the front tyre. Oh my god, that feels like I'm gonna tip the bike over, but oh, it takes a bit of getting used to. But yes, you put the weight on your wrists, so you're loading up that front tyre, which is something obviously I learned from that off-roading day. Very different discipline, but same principles of loading up the front tyre, because that's where you want your body weight is, and the upper head is demonstrating with a kind of some exaggerated body English there, where you need your weight to tip the bike into the corner. And it feels a bit odd at first. It's really not what I'm used to, but I'm kind of dialing in. And although this isn't a kind of an extreme sports bike, you know, compared with something like a proper super sports bike, the body position is not completely arse up, head down. It's still a lot more exaggerated than I'm used to. So here we go, lean it in. That feels like a bit of counter steering there, but I don't know why I'm surprised that a sports bike should put you in a kind of sportier frame of mind than the roadsters and the kind of classics that I've been riding so far, but it kind of makes sense of what Triumph is trying to do with this bike and what bikes in this sector are trying to do in making these bikes feel more accessible, and a natural step up from the kind of sporty nakeds and those kind of bikes that a lot of the people looking at these bikes will be coming from. So as I was saying, kind of really they shouldn't feel that much different from the Honda Hornet that I came from just after I passed my test, but in terms of power output and all the rest of it, but just the riding position and the way this bike goes through the corners, the agility is way different, and just the kind of the experience. Here you go, Andy's telling me to get my knee out. I don't think we're going to get it down, but it kind of feels like I am, even if I'm not. So this is Andy's doing what he does on a track day instruction, similar technique, just to kind of lead me on and tell me where I need to have my weight for the corners and things like that. So let's just talk a bit more about the bike now. in terms of what Triumph has done with this, before getting on the bike I did do my homework and kind of swat up on all how it compares with those rivals that I mentioned in the intro, so the Yamaha R7, the Kawasaki Ninja 650, the Honda CBR 650R, the Suzuki GSX 8R, lots of R's. So rather than kind of reel off a load of stats, I'll put all that information into the video description, so if you want to check out the number crunching, have a look there. But looking at kind of steering geometry and all that kind of thing, the Yamaha seems the most sort of aggressive of this cohort of bikes in terms of the way it's set up. It's also the lightest by some margin, but in terms of kind of head angle and trail and things like that, Triumph has gone pretty aggressive with this Daytona. It's kind of similar to the Yamaha in terms of that. The bike's a bit longer, so wheelbase is a bit longer. It's heavier than the Yamaha. The Yamaha's only 188 kilos. This is just over 201 kilos. So you'll notice that difference on the road in terms of the other bikes in the class. The Yamaha, the Honda is fairly steady in its setup. The Kawasaki pretty safe, and the Suzuki kind of somewhere in between. So, and that geometry kind of makes sense of the fact that Triumph has gone pretty aggressive with the power output of this bike as well. You know, 95 horsepower is pretty much top of the class. Only the Honda matches it for horsepower and the way it's delivered as well. Both the Honda and the Triumph, they've got revs, 5-figure power bands, which is nice. That's kind of what I want out of a sports bike. The Yamaha, the Suzuki, all the others are all kind of parallel twins, and they're kind of done by 10,000 revs, but the Honda and the Triumph, you know, peak power is up in the 11s and 12s, so that to me, if I were in the market for a sporty bike, I like the idea of revs. We'll see how that opinion differs once I've actually ridden the Suzuki. I'll be interested to see, because that's a really torquey bike, so torqueer than the Triumph, so it'd be a very different character. But saying that, as well as the triple having its kind of unique character in the class, it's also got it all. It's got revs, but it's got torque as well, so pretty much all your torque is there from, it's less of a curve, more of a kind of flat line from about 3,000 all the way up to 12,000, so it's incredibly flexible. Whatever gear you want to use, there's acceleration there on demand. Now the bikes we're riding here, they don't have the optional quickshifter. I think that's another £245, but that feels fine. I mean, the gearbox feels absolutely lovely, the clutch is nice and light, so I don't feel I'm missing out in terms of the quickshifter there. Tech-wise, it's not the most tech-heavy bike, so the instrument cluster here is a little bit, there's no big TFT screen, the information's quite basic, so there are others in the class that have more in the terms of electronics and tech. There's 3 rider modes on this: rain, normal and sport. So but yeah, if you want the kind of more techie bike with more rider modes and all that kind of thing and a big colour screen, then the others that do it better. Oh, I need to stand still there. Less talking, more riding. But in terms of character, this engine is really, it's going to be a USP
in the class, I think, and the way they've achieved that over the Trident, they've done a lot of work to this engine. So same basic 660cc unit, but it's got new cylinder head, various upgraded internals, bigger exhaust valves, new throttle bodies. So there's a lot of work been done to this engine to get that extra power, but it's not just the power, it's the sound. It's savage. I love the way it revs out. So that's a real USP for the bike. In terms of the suspension, stuff like that, as I said, it's not adjustable, but I don't think that's a problem for a kind of rookie bike like this. I mean, unless you're kind of, you know, I don't know more about suspension than Triumph's engineers, do I? So I think I trust their ability to set a bike up out of the box. Oh, that feels tight. More than I do, so. And obviously on these lovely smooth Spanish roads, there's not much of a challenge for the suspension, but in terms of the support, damper support, that feels really good. There's no diving and the braking. We've been over a few kind of speed bumps in villages and stuff like that, and felt pretty plush there as well. So I think in terms of nailing that kind of all-day comfort compared with the kind of more hardcore super sports bike, I think this bike really mission accomplished there. I think most of all, to bring it full circle, is the intimidation factor that I felt before we started this ride has pretty much gone, and it's just been replaced by excitement and just kind of appreciation of just what a difference a sports bike riding position makes to your riding. It just changes your riding style, and all these kind of body movements that you can see Andy doing up ahead of me, they just come naturally because that's the kind of the position that the bike wants you to be in. I don't know why I'm surprised that a sports bike should feel more confident in the corners than a more upright bike, but there we go, you know, every day is a school day and all that. So yeah, colour me impressed, relieved, and maybe, having said, was I a scrambler guy in the last video, maybe I've already abandoned that and gone straight to my sports bike phase, who knows. But this is a great fun bike, I'm enjoying myself a lot. But with that, I better probably concentrate on this lesson I'm getting from Andy and get on with some riding.
So there we go, my first ride on a sporty bike. How was it? Well, I will admit I started the day pretty intimidated at the idea of riding a bike that looks like this, with this kind of riding position, you know, that kind of head down, backside up, feet back. The whole look of the thing carries with it, as I said, a kind of burden of expectation about how you're going to ride it. You're going to be flat out all the time, you know, really attacking all the corners, and it maybe would be a little bit, I don't know, boring if you weren't on it all the time. So that was how I started the day, and I will admit that when I first got on the bike, it did feel pretty strange being that kind of stretched out with all the weight over the front wheel and all that kind of thing. Something very, very different from what I've experienced so far in my admittedly pretty short riding career. So there was a little bit to get used to there, but as I said at the start of this video in the introduction about how these kind of new school sort of sports bikes, whatever we're calling them, are kind of meant to be accommodating and accessible for people like me who don't have a long history of riding sports bikes, or perhaps any bikes at all, who are coming from like the Honda Hornet that I started out on. You know, that to this would be quite a logical step. And very quickly I found that my confidence was growing, having that weight over the front wheel in the corners. I was going around corners way faster, getting more lean angle than you know, in my head I was kind of like some knee down super sports hero, but the pictures will probably tell a different story when they come out. But anyway, that's how I felt, and if that's how a motorbike makes you feel, then that's kind of half the battle, isn't it? Now, in terms of the Daytona 660 itself, I think we'll do some number crunching, as I say, in the information below the video, but it's a really, really strong package. The price is good. That engine is a real USP, you know, the screaming triple, the sound, the revs, the flexibility, it's kind of got everything, hasn't it? It's a really, really appealing engine, and of course, you know, that kind of sensory feedback, that's what you get a motorbike for, isn't it? Particularly a sports bike and a motive bike like this. So the triple is unique in the class, and it does give this bike a really strong selling point from the off. The rest of the package looks really, really good as well. If I were to nitpick on a couple of things, you know, this display here, if you're, you know, after a kind of big TFT screen and loads of functionality and all that kind of stuff, that's maybe a little bit basic. This is really, really petty, but these reflectors here bolted to the top of the brake caliper mount, they look really, really ugly. I think if it were my bike, they might fall off, if you know what I mean. But apart from that, I think it's, you know, it's hard to fault as a package. I'm really, really interested to see how it compares with some of the other bikes in the class that I mentioned in the introduction, and I'm particularly excited to get the Suzuki GSX-8R in, which is coming in a couple of weeks, so there'll be a video on that very, very soon. So the Suzuki is quite different, but although in terms of the price, the performance, the size, all that kind of thing, it's pretty comparable. I'm expecting it to have a very different character, because that's a parallel twin, and very, very torquey, even more torquey than the Triumph, but not as revvy. So what will be the more exciting bike to ride? Which is the more kind of relevant characteristics to a bike like this? Well, I guess we'll find out, won't we? But overall, I've had a fantastic day. It's a bit weird to assess a bike when I've got nothing to kind of compare it against, but in terms of a first sports bike experience, I think that was great fun, and I really learned a lot. So a shout out to Andy as well for his body English. You'll have seen on the video him kind of shaking his backside as we're coming into the corners, teaching me how to shift my weight around the bike for the corners and get the most out of it. That was absolutely amazing. I learnt a lot today as well as having a load of fun. So fantastic day out. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure you give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more, including that video on the Suzuki that I mentioned. Drop me a message in the comments thread if you want to chat about the bike or got any specific questions or anything like that. And for now, I'll say thanks for watching, goodbye, and ride safe.